Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Now, I do apologise, my throat is a little bit scratchy this week, but I will try and deliver the episode just as I normally would. Now, in this week's episode, we are looking at the lovely little book that is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Now, the book was published in 1911 and the beautiful film was released in 1994. Now, as usual, I will be scaling the adaptation on 5 major things. Obviously, your characters, your plot, your setting, overall how well the book and the film did. Does the film stand in its own right? Now, I will always be discussing the book and the film in full, so there will always be spoilers within the episodes. So do just bear that in mind. Now, first up is, as always, characters. Now, you do come across quite a few major characters in this. So first of all, you come across our main protagonist here, Mary. Now, she's given the nickname Mary Mary, quite contrary. How do your gardens grow? With silver bells and cockle shells and pretty maids all in a row. And she really grows to that nickname, I find. Now, she's described as being very plain, very yellow looking when we first encounter her. Her hair's very limp, very ragged. She's a very sour child. She doesn't really. She's always used to getting what she wants, so she never has to deal with any consequences. And then when she loses her parents, she gets sent over to Misselthwaite Manor in Yorkshire, and she realizes it's not quite like that. So within the book, she then gradually becomes a fatter child, a healthier child. Her hair becomes bigger and bushier, and she becomes a lot happier within herself. Now, I feel the film did that very well. Obviously, it is quite hard to have a very yellow child at the beginning of the film. But you do get this feeling she's quite drab. They dress her in greys and blacks. And as the film progresses, and she becomes more adventurous, more outgoing, and she starts to get to know the garden a bit more, she then starts to become in brighter colours. So you start encountering her in brighter colours. And it starts off slowly with like a red scarf and a red hat, and and things like that. And it does develop throughout the film as well, which I think is beautifully done. Now you come across Mrs. Medlock. Now she's my biggest change, I think, in the film. So in the book, she's described as being stout, beady eyes. She's a firm woman. She's a very Yorkshire woman as well. She grew up with Susan Sowerby, who's Martha's mother. So she's very loving as well. She's no nonsense, but she does understand that Mary is a child, and when Mary starts, being there and getting Colin better, she's happy with that. She's fine. She admits it. In the film, I think they do her a bit of a disservice. You still see her as very stern. She's very thin, tall, stern woman, and you sort of turn around and go, okay, that's fine. But she's always like that. She doesn't let up. She doesn't become nicer throughout the film. She doesn't, admit anything. She's just always got to be right. She's the housekeeper in charge of everything. And I feel like that's not who she was. And they're a bit mean to her in the film, because obviously in the film you go, oh, she's horrible. Glad she got what she deserved. But in the book, she's very understanding, and she's just trying to do the best that she can. Now you come across Martha. Now, Martha is a very Yorkshire lass. They don't really get that as much in the film, but I think it's because, apart from if you're from Yorkshire yourself, you probably won't understand 90% of what they're saying. So they probably stuck to I don't want to say common, because that's not what it is, but it is sort of like they kept to the dialect a bit, but they did sort of like not make it as Yorkshire as it is in the book. I mean, admittedly, there were some sentences, and I've lived up north for 9 years now. There are some sentences that even I was like, what they're saying. She becomes Mary's friend. She starts off, sort of at odds with Mary. So Mary thinks that she's the servant, and there to look after wait on hand and foot. Martha turns around and basically says, no, I'm Mrs. Medlock's servant. I'll be here to help you. But then through Martha, Mary gets outside. She starts playing. She gets a skipping rope. She meets Martha's brother Dickon. So Martha's quite a key character, and in the book she finds out a little bit earlier about Colin and Mary. In the film, a little bit later, but I always liked Martha as a character, and I think they did that nicely on the screen. They got everything across that they should have done. Now you come across Dickon. Now, Dickon is a animal charmer. He's a friend to all animals. In the book, he's always surrounded by some sort of like squirrels, crow, pony, lambs, fox, everything and anything. And in the film, it is done just as well. He's again a very Yorkshire lad. He's Martha's brother. He loves gardens. He's the one that helps Mary breathe life back into the garden, even though she was doing quite well on her own. But he helps her sort of like breathe life back in. And he's just a really nice guy. And in the book, he's described as being one of those guys that when you come across, you just like, you've got nothing against them. And I think that's beautifully done in the film. And I 100% sort of sit there going, oh, Dickon, he's so sweet. And you want Mary and Dickon to end up together. I think in the second film, they retcon, like Secret Garden 2, please don't watch that. They retcon it and get Colin with Mary. And that was, no. But Dickon is where Mary's heart lies. Now you've got Lord Craven. Now, Lord Craven in the book is a little bit more understanding. He's I mean, he's still quite a depressed character, but I feel like in the film they made him a lot more depressed. In the book, he sort of is nicer to Mary. Still sort of neglects her, but also gives her books and also gives her a little bit of land. And he's just genuinely, he's heartbroken. Doesn't excuse him for child neglect with his son, who he hasn't, well, he sees, but he doesn't look after and hasn't looked after for 10 years. And he's described as being like a hunchback and miserable over the loss of his wife for 10 years ago. And I think that's absolutely spot on. Now, as I said, he's a little bit more depressed in the film than he is in the book, but it's still a very, very firm character. Then you come across Ben Witherstaff. Now, Ben Witherstaff is a gardener, and he is the first one to talk to Mary and the first one to kind of become friends with Mary. He's also the one that sort of like, so the robin comes over to Mary first, but Ben Witherstaff kind of like gives her a bit more insight to the robin. He also ends up, he's secretly tending the rose garden, the secret garden, and he then comes in on the secret and becomes sort of like a confidant of the children in both the film and the book. But he's sort of like the surly gardener that even like, because when they lost Lady Craven, he felt it just as much because he looked after that garden. That was his and her personal like little thing, and I think that's beautifully done, absolutely beautifully done. I love Ben in the film. Now you come across Colin. Now Colin is the self-centered Raja, although he's not a Raja, but that's just what Mary calls him. He's the one that thinks he's going to die. He's a hypochondriac. But then again, if you're a child and you constantly hear people telling you you're going to die, you're going to start thinking it. If you keep hearing people say you're going to have a hunchback, you start thinking it. So fair play to him, he's only acting on what he knows. In the book, he doesn't seem as selfish and you don't see as many tantrums, and he sort of has a natural progression. And as soon as he realises that like there's a secret garden and everything, he works his way towards it. He ends up ending up walking, surprising his father. In the film, he puts on a lot more tantrums and you see a lot more of him in the film. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. They just sort of like elongated parts of his characteristics. So apart from making Mrs. Medlock a lot harsher and Lord Craven quite a bit more depressed, I believe they've captured all the little parts and characteristics that make these characters the fantastic people that you want to believe in when you're reading the book. And I thought they brought them to life absolutely wonderfully on the screen. So I am going to give it a 9 out of 10 for characteristics. Now the setting of the book is Misselthwaite Manor even, and of course the beautiful secret garden which every single person that's ever seen the film or read the book has wanted in their own heart of hearts. I'm still hoping I'll find my secret garden one of these days. Now it's set in the time period that it was written, and I believe that the film perfectly encompasses every part of this, so it's a 10 out of 10 for setting. So now you come across plot. There's a few little differences, but I'll just go through sort of like the plot. Now, one of the bigger differences is in the book, the family die of cholera, and she's left in this house where they think everybody's died. They come in and find her, and then that's how she ends up in Yorkshire. However, in the film, it's an earthquake that kills them, and they know that there's a child, and they go in and get her and take her to Yorkshire. Now, in both the narratives, the parents don't want Mary. The mum in the film, she doesn't seem as neglectful. She just seems more sort of like occupied. In the book, she's perfectly being called. No, she did not want this child. She hired out somebody else. Didn't want this child anywhere near her. Some people don't, and if you've got the money to be able to do it, some people won't. Now, as well, in the film, the earthquake happens, the parents die, she goes straight over into Yorkshire. In the book, the cholera happens, she gets found, and then she stays with another family, and that's where she gets the nickname Mistress Mary, quite contrary. And then from there, she gets moved on to Yorkshire. But in the book, in she gets the boat to London, then she gets a train, and then she gets a coach up to Misselthwaite Manor. In the film, I can understand why they wouldn't want to show a boat and then a train and then a coach. So you just see the boat come in and then the train to Yorkshire. So you don't really see much else of that. But it is very, very similar. Now, Mr. Craven's dead wife, this is one thing that is quite different. His dead wife in the film is Mary's mother's twin sister. In the book, it's the sister of Mary's father. Now, it's only a slight difference, but the reason they do it in the film is because they're supposed to be like identical. They get like little identical ivory elephants, and it's all little things like that that build up. In the book, it was just a relative. It was just, Mary's dad's sister, both of whom are dead anyway. So now, there is a couple of additional characters as well added in the book. Now, you do have the manservant that's added in the book. You do kind of see him in the film, but he's not really mentioned as much. But also the biggest one, and I wish I could have seen it on film, is Mrs. Sowerby, which is Martha and Dickon's mum. In the book, I will discuss later how she becomes quite a big character. And I feel like her being missed on screen sort of takes away a little bit of the magic at parts. But again, they can't have everybody, and I do kind of understand why they decided to cut her. So, meeting of the Robin is the same in the book and the film, and the Robin then showing her the secret garden is exactly the same. The only difference is the key. Now, in the film, Mary finds the key in a secret room that her mother's twin sister used to live in. In the book, the Robin shows her where the key was buried. But in both, the Robin does show her where the secret garden actually is and helps her get into the actual garden. He's quite a proud little Robin, bless him. And the Robin is also a big key to her becoming a healthier child, because she's sort of like, the Robin is the first person that she kind of goes, ooh, I quite like them. I can be nicer to people. Now, you hear about, as I said, you hear about Martha's family a lot more, and Ben with the staff is around in the book more than he is in the film. But I understand why, because some of the interactions are just filler if you had them in a film, and I do understand why they kind of cut them out. So that's absolutely fine. But you do keep the main interactions of Ben with the children, which I think is really good. Now, in both, Lord Craven calls Mary to him. Now, in the book, it's because Mrs. Sowerby says that Lord Craven needs to talk to her. In the film, it's because he just wants to see her. And then that's how Mary asks for her little bit of earth that's unwanted. Any little bit of earth, unwanted. And he goes, yes, fine, take your bit of earth. In the film, he then storms out, never to be seen again, until they call him back with magic. In the book, he sort of goes, and I'm leaving tomorrow. But he was always leaving tomorrow. And so you do keep that in the same. Now, as I said before, Colin doesn't throw as many tantrums. And in the book, Mrs. Medlock finds out about Mary coming to visit him so much quicker. In fact, she turns around and goes, fine, let her visit him. He becomes better, and he's becoming a nicer child since she's been let in to visit him. And also Martha is complicit in the book of helping Mary see Colin. Now, in the film, Mary doesn't get caught out till like quite close to sort of like the end there. And then that's when they take him into the secret garden and so on and so forth. But Mrs. Medlock is furious, absolutely kicks off, locks her in her room, not a very nice person. And again, as I said, Mrs. Medlock has done a disservice, because in the book, I absolutely loved her. In the film, she's just a lot sterner and a lot harsher. I mean, you do kind of understand why she's dealing with a child that's very petulant, very stubborn, very rude, who's been told that she's going to die. You've got a Lord Craven that doesn't want anything to do with the child. Then you've got Mary that's come from nowhere, that's suddenly this little like sullen thing. She's got a lot going on her plate, but I still don't like how they did it. Now, in both the book and the film, you have Dickon interact with Mary first and then interact with Colin. Now, in the book, Dickon comes to Colin's room earlier on, surrounded by animals, and gets Colin used to sort of like getting used to the animals and everything like that. And then he takes him out into the garden. In the film, it's straight out into the garden, and that's where he meets Dickon. It's a little thing like that, but obviously it is little differences here. Um, so the film has Colin going into the garden a lot more than it does in the book. In the book, it is quite a slow build up. Then he goes into the garden, and then he learns how to walk, and then he uses magic to help him walk. Both, oh my god, both have the magic of the garden so beautifully told and beautifully shown. Now, in the Secret Garden, it's never overdone. They always get the information spot on. You sit there and go, "Oh, I wish I could see what this is like." And then you see it in the film, and it's just, I mean, obviously they like do the fast forward bit because in the book it's a slower build up to summer, but in the film it's sort of like this fast forward of like these plants growing, and it is beautiful. It honestly is. It's had me wanting to visit that secret garden since I was little. And I will find it one day. I will. Now, as I said, in the book, you do come across Dickon and Martha's mother. Now, Martha's mother in the book is the reason why Lord Craven will see Mary, is the reason why Mary doesn't get a governess, is the reason why Mary gets a skipping rope, is the reason why Colin and Mary are able to sort of like keep their little shenanigans away from everybody by pretending to be ill at home but getting hungry, and Martha's mother helps with that. And also she gets let in on the secret of the garden, and then because of that she writes a letter to Lord Craven to get him back so that he can see what the garden's done. And I feel like she could have been introduced in the film, and I do feel like it would have been a nice character to see. But in the film, Lord Craven gets brought back because you've got like this weird chanting scene where just like, "Hey, great spirits, please come to me, bring back my father back," and so on and so forth. And it's really, really nice. And in both, he, like, Lord Craven, while he's away, gets this image that he needs to go back to the garden, and he's got his wife being like, he's sort of like, "Where are you?" And she's like, "I'm in the garden." And so it is, you do have that, which I think is lovingly done because it shows that there is a little bit of magic there. I do think it works quite well. Now, the ending of both narratives are the same, and honestly is enough for anyone that has a heart to bring a little tear to your eye. So what happens is Lord Craven comes back. Colin's not aware of it. Lord Craven goes to the garden and he sees Colin running around. Now, in the book, Colin runs into him. In the film, he's like, Colin's playing like this game where he's got a bandana over his eyes and then finds, Lord Craven and touches his face and goes, "Father." But in both, you see this beautiful moment where Lord Craven realizes that he has not lost his son. And it's just so heart-wrenching. And then you realize that this family's been brought back to life, just like the garden has, just like Mary has. And as they're walking back, now in the film, it is Dickon that says, "Have a look," and then you see Mary and Lord Craven and Colin coming down. In the book, it is Ben Witherstaff, but you still get that sort of like when everyone opens the windows and sees Colin walking, somebody that they never thought would walk, would never feel better, would die young, would be a hunchback, and they see him, and it's just such an uplifting moment, and it's so beautifully done. Now, the film narrative was extremely close to the book. Although the film did miss Mrs. Sowerby completely, had Mrs. Medlock be a much more severe woman, and missed a couple of the subtle little differences, I believe that the plot captured the pure sense of beauty and magic that is The Secret Garden, and that is the book. And so for this, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Now, does the film stand in its own right? In case you hadn't guessed throughout this episode, of course it does. It is amazing. I would recommend anybody to watch this film. It is a beautiful film. Me and my sister Nikki especially adore this film. We can send pictures and say, "Guess this film," and it can be the most obscure picture and we'd still get it. It is such a beautiful film, and honestly, I would recommend anybody, absolutely anybody, to watch it. And it's spellbound in the garden. It's the actual garden itself is absolutely beautiful. It has a giant swing in it that everybody wishes for, and it's one of those that just leaves you at the end just feeling happy. And it's a nice film. It's a happy film. And so I would give this a 10 out of 10. 100% a 10 out of 10. But considering I've never read the Secret Garden book, and I did read that in under a week, and I adored the book as well. So 100%, please read the book as well. It is so beautifully written and such a lovely narrative. Now comes to the final rating. Overall, the film and the book are both such fantastic narratives, and it leaves you with just such a lovely sense of calm and happiness at the end of it. And I think the film perfectly encapsulates everything that the book set out to be. This, despite a few differences, as I've mentioned previously, but I'm going to give the final rating. I'm going to give the overall film to book adaptation a rating of 8 out of 10. Now, of course, as I say every week, this is my own opinion. If for whatever reason you disagree with what I'm saying, absolutely leave a comment below. Do click subscribe and do like this video. Every new video will come out on a Wednesday. And leave below in the comments any book to film adaptations you'd like me to have a look at. So join me next time for my contented narrative around Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So until then, please remember to always keep it contento.